Well, first of all, I want to wish you a happy Easter. So happy Easter, everybody. Happy Easter. Thank you. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. That's the Easter greeting. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. And that's precisely it. That's the message. Jesus is risen. He's alive. That's the message. Jesus is not dead. He's alive. That is what the first disciples proclaimed to their death. Jesus is alive. Have any of you ever seen somebody be tortured and killed and 3 days later have lunch with somebody? That's what happened. Jesus rose from the dead, and not only that, he said that he would. Remember, Jesus went into Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. Josephus, an ancient historian, said that there were approximately 2 million Jews who went to Jerusalem for the Passover. This was the high time of Judaism in the old days. And Jesus went there, and if you remember a week ago, Palm Sunday, we recalled this, that when Jesus entered Jerusalem that year, the whole town erupted, and they put palms and branches in front of him, yelling, Hosanna, thinking, this is the man who's going to kick these Romans out of Jerusalem. The whole town was hailing him as the Messiah. Do you remember that? They all saw Jesus. He was the center of attention. But boy, how things changed that week. And by the end of the week, he was betrayed, falsely accused, and then Pontius Pilate had him scourged, a horrific, torturous event. And then he carried this cross outside of town, right at the edge, and he was crucified there. Everybody saw it. Everyone was paying attention. And they saw him killed and buried, and the stone rolled in front of the tomb. They saw the centurion throw a spear into his side because he was dead. And then 3 days later, he's walking around. And the scriptures tell us that hundreds of people saw him. He spent 40 days before he ascended into heaven. Hundreds and hundreds of people saw him. You get this? He's alive. He rose from the dead. And what I love about our Christian faith is that what we believe is not based upon one single prophet, one man's philosophy that he writes into a book and says, all of you need to believe this. This is the story of life. This is how you're meant to live. Here, read my book. You all need to believe this. That's not Christianity at all. Christianity is, did you see what happened? Yeah, I saw it too. Yeah, pretty amazing, huh? Yeah, did you see it? Yeah, yep, that's Christianity. In fact, Jesus wrote no book. Did you know that? The only thing we know that Jesus wrote was when the Pharisees brought him a woman caught in adultery to trap Jesus. And it said that he bent down and began to write in the sand. That's all we know that he ever wrote. Because Jesus didn't come to pass on a book. He came to pass on everlasting life. And there were many who witnessed it and have gone telling the story that Jesus rose from the dead. But who cares if he rose from the dead? Oh, I care, because if he rose from the dead as he promised, then what else did he say is important? If he said that he would do that, what else did he say? Oh, that's the important part. And he made many promises to all who would follow him. And the ultimate promise is for those who believe in him and follow him, is that death would no longer be the end for us either. Because do you know what? All of you are going to die. Good morning. You're all going to die. But the good news is, there's resurrection for those who follow Christ. Death now becomes simply a passageway to a new life. I look at it this way. I use a Macintosh computer, sorry. And every once in a while I get these updates, my computer updates, and I have to restart it for it to work. That I know this is kind of a lame example, but Christ comes into our life, and death is our restart. We're going to restart at some point and enter into a whole new way of life. That we're going to have to die for that to happen, but in the meantime, Christ gives us his life. We participate in it now, and it begins to grow in us. And when we die, who cares? Death's not the end. It's just the restart. And you and I live in a culture that has flipped out about death. And Christians say, who cares? St. Paul will say, oh, death? And what? Because it doesn't matter anymore. Because he's alive. And then we follow Jesus and follow after him. Now we take him serious. He's risen from the dead and he's promised all kinds of things. And so by following Jesus, now I can come to understand what life is meant to be and how to live it. Because you and I know that everybody in the world has their philosophy of life and how it's supposed to be lived. And you know what? Look around. It's chaos. Turn the news on. It's nuts out there. There's lots of great things and great people. But when we're all following our own way, it's chaos. And Jesus is saying, let me show you the way. Follow me. And when we follow Jesus, something radical begins to happen. And all Christians know this, who take Christ seriously. When we follow Jesus, here's what happens. Our lives do not become so important as they used to be. Because as a Christian, fundamentally, your life, you're not the center of the universe. Sorry. That's not to say you aren't important. You're so important that Christ would die for you, but the world doesn't revolve around you. It revolves around God. He's the center. And when we follow Jesus and make God the center, and the world's not about me and myself and I and my life and my plans, and right, I know I get that way sometimes. I wake up in the morning, my whole life is just me, mine. You're a distraction to me, and you're taking my time, da-da-da-da-da. And Christianity is just turning that upside down. And it's a life of love. And love, by definition, is to choose the greatest good for the other. Love is about the other. God is love. And he's about us. And that's why as Catholics we hang crucifixes in our church. Yes, we know he rose from the dead, thank you. But Jesus says there is no greater love than to lay down your life for a friend. And so we keep that before us always, that our life is not the focus. It's your life. Others. And when I begin to make my life not the focus, but others in love, here's the great and crazy paradox. You faithful Christians know this. When we stop making our life the center of the universe and live in love for the others, our lives become transformed. The more I try to get my own needs met by myself, the crazier my life gets. The more I lose my life in love and generous service to others, the more I find myself and become set free. It's like Adam and Eve in the garden. Remember Adam and Eve, there was that apple in the middle of the garden. They weren't supposed to eat it, and they just seized onto it. Mine. And that's us. I'm in control. It's my way. But that just leads to such unhappiness. The way that Jesus came was, here, take it. Father, not my will, your will be done. He would say, whoever seeks to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. And that's the message I invite you into, is to give your life to something worth following. Jesus. Follow him. He's risen from the dead. I'd pay attention to that guy. If you know somebody else who's risen from the dead, then have at it. Follow him. But Christ has risen from the dead. That's the message. And he invites us into life and to love. And it's not that it's easy to put our lives and focus them on others. But you who are great Christians and have been growing in God's love for a long time, you know what I mean by this. You just keep pouring yourself out in love for others, and your life becomes more and more transformed. And the world around you, as that letter we read from St. Corinthians, from St. Paul to the Corinthians, we become like leaven in the world, like leaven in dough, and just begins to transform around us before our very eyes. Or I could just be me, myself, and I. The choice is yours. Jesus makes no one follow him. But you know what? He's alive. He's risen from the dead. And he wants that for all of us. So happy Easter. Christ is risen. So think about what that means.